everybody. I'm back. Sorry, it's been a minute. Things have just been really crazy lately, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate. This week we are making vegan blueberry lemon muffins, which are eggless. You can do it in one bowl, and they are also vegan and dairy-free. If you do not have, and it's all got simple ingredients you should probably have in the pantry. If you don't worry about eating plant-based or anything like that, just use regular butter and regular milk. I think that's the only difference in this recipe. So we'll go ahead and get started. I've gone ahead and measured out some of the ingredients. Otherwise, we all know from my last video that it'll take me a while to get through everything. So we're gonna start with the streusel topping. So this has a tablespoon of fresh lemon zest, 3 tablespoons granulated sugar, which you'll see mine right here. It does look off-white. I do use organic cane sugar, but as long as it's like your white table sugar, that's totally fine. Also, 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. You could probably use, I think it's Bob's Red Mill 1-for-1 gluten-free. I haven't actually tried it, but that's probably the closest thing, or King Arthur's gluten-free flour, I know seems to be a good 1-for-1 replacement. In addition to the 1/4 cup all-purpose flour, you want 1/8 teaspoon of cinnamon and 3 tablespoons of melted butter. Again, I'm using vegan butter because that's what works for me, but regular butter is just fine. So we're gonna mix the butter in here. And you can see it here. I'll turn my camera down when we start to mix the other ingredients. But this was already fairly mixed. So we've got our nice little streusel topping there, and I'm gonna add a tablespoon of fresh lemon zest. So I've got like a fancy zester, but then this is also just like a cheese grater that you can use. And again, you just want 1 tablespoon. When it comes to baking ingredients, I tend to measure the dry things and the wet things, but when it comes to lemon zest, I think it's just a challenge for me to get it into my little measuring spoon, so I'm kind of gonna eyeball it, because this is just for the actual streusel topping. So we'll go ahead and grate about a tablespoon, which never happens as quick as I want it to. Like, I always just think it should be done. How have you guys been since the last video? Did anyone try the salted cookie butter bark? And if so, what did you think about it? I literally went to Trader Joe's a couple weeks ago just to buy 6 jars of the salted cookie butter bark just to have it in the pantry, because that seems to be one of the things that people always want, and it's a nice just gift to give. Like, our neighbor loves it, and his birthday's coming up, and that kind of thing. All right. Set the lemon aside. Getting all the additional lemon off the grater, and I will set that aside for now. The texture of the streusel topping, it should be like wet sand, if you can see this. All right, so we're gonna set this aside until we are ready for it. In this case, I will set it over here, out of our way. And we're going to go ahead and mix our dry ingredients into the bowl first. So what I've done is I have 2 1/4 cups all-purpose flour. I have 3/4 cup of the sugar. I've already added 1.5 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. You can use regular salt if you like, but we're gonna put the dry ingredients first into the bowl. We are going to mix the wet ingredients together. So for that, you'll need a 1/2 cup of plant milk. Again, use regular dairy or your plant milk of choice. 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil. I actually just used some leftover sunflower oil. In my experience, I've interchanged like coconut oil for sunflower oil. I wouldn't do olive oil because then you kind of have an olive oil taste. If you use vegetable or canola oil, that's fine too. You just want something without a strong taste, otherwise that will affect the taste of your muffins. So I literally used up this bottle, so I'm winning it today. Let's see what else. A half cup of applesauce, which I have here, and I'm gonna just put it in with the oil. I prefer, so I usually mix the dry ingredients first and then the wet ingredients, so that way you have them separate. And let's see, what else do we need? A quarter cup of lemon juice, which I have right here. There's nothing to see, I'm just pouring the liquids in here, but I'll show it to you all in a second. After the lemon juice, so we have 1.5 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. Okay. So I go through a lot of vanilla extract, and so a few days ago, no, it was probably a week ago at this point, I just started thinking about, you know, with the way things are going in our politics and economy, like how can I just be more resourceful? And so I did a quick search. I was like, well, I use a lot of vanilla extract. Like, what can I do about that? So can I introduce you to my very own vanilla extract, which will be ready in 6 to 12 months. I am as proud of this as if I had a sourdough starter that survived. I am not a sourdough girly. But this vanilla extract makes me so proud that I told the bartender where we went for drinks over the weekend, and he got a big kick out of that. It made me so happy because we were talking about simple syrups or something. But yeah, and basically to do this, I found a good company that sources the vanilla beans, and you just get like a grade B vanilla bean. If depending on what you want the underlying flavor to be like is dependent on whether you get it from like Papua New Guinea, I think Ecuador is another choice, or I just got Tahitian, and they say grade B because it has more of an opportunity to emit the flavor back into the alcohol. So for this I used, I believe it is an ounce of vanilla beans for every 4 ounces of alcohol. And you can use rum or things like that, but we had some vodka left over in what seemed to be a gallon bottle that we got at Costco years ago for our wedding that we just, and I don't mean like 20 years ago, we've only been married a few years. So, but we don't really drink a lot of vodka. So I was like, hey, why don't I use, no, I'm sorry, it was actually 1 ounce per 8 ounces. 1 ounce of vanilla beans per 8 ounces. And so basically you take them, you wash them, and you just split them down the middle. So I took out my little kitchen scale. I got 2 ounces of vanilla beans that I'd ordered from this company, and I put it in 16 ounces of vodka. And I'm supposed to be able to use it in 6 months, but I'm gonna wait a year, and you can just let it sit until you use it. But then I promptly ordered more vanilla to make more vanilla extract. So we'll see what happens with that. I'll keep you posted. But again, I am more proud of that than like a sourdough starter. So where were we? Back to the liquid ingredients. All right. So we also have a 1/2 cup of milk and 1.5 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. So I'm going to go ahead and put the vanilla into, I just measured 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract into the liquid mixture over here. All right, now we're going to mix the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. And I just like to put it in a big bowl so it doesn't slosh around. So there we go. The wet goes into the dry. Now we saved the best for last, which is the 1 cup of the blueberries. We need 1 1/3 cups, but separated. So we also have 1/3 of a cup over here to wait till last. So we are going to mix this around. So here, what we're going to do next, we've mixed it, but you can see that you don't want to over mix it. You want it to still be kind of grainy, and it kind of looks like a little bit of like a biscuit dough, but a little bit wetter than that. So you just want to make sure everything is mixed together. I probably would not use an electric mixer for this. I like silicone spatulas, so that's what I'm using, metal spoon, whatever works. And this is where you put in the majority of your blueberries. It calls for 1 1/3 cups total, but it also said for it to be divided. And now my item of contention. This is ground thyme. I am not a thyme person, but I think it really adds to this recipe. So what I did, I didn't even have, I believe you can either use 2 tablespoons of fresh thyme. I actually just used just under a teaspoon of ground time. And what I did was I had little pieces of thyme and I put them in the coffee grinder to grind them up into a little powder. So we're gonna mix that in as well. And we'll see what it looks like when it's all mixed together. All right, so we have our batter mixed, and the recipe, like I mentioned, it said gently mix, don't overmix the batter, which reading this recipe actually reminded me of that episode of Schitt's Creek when Moira and David are making, wasn't it enchiladas or something? And it was like fold in the cheese, and they're like, what does fold mean? But that's what, it makes me giggle like a 4-year-old whenever I see something about mixing things in. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and put the recipe calls for us to go ahead and put it in the cups and reserve the last of the blueberries to just kind of place on top for, and it'll bake for about 10 to 15 minutes. So while we're doing this, I just want to go ahead and chit chat a little bit today. Something that's been heavy on my mind, and I think I'm really just trying to reconcile what it means to me. And I think I said already, but if I didn't, this is supposed to make 12 cupcakes. I just used the leftover liners that I already have, and I'll end up filling in the rest with some plain liners. But this has been really on my mind lately, but with everything that's going on in politics and thinking about like the SAVE Act and I read this, I read a really good book called Cassandra Speaks, and I'm following all kinds of pages that are working on like advocacy and things we can do as women and females, and women playing small, and even the thing that I don't know if you're aware, but they don't have a really great measure to diagnose women with ADHD, because the tests are, as far as I'm aware, and if something's changed, you can let me know that, but the tests were made to diagnose it in boys, which means women who, as we know, women tend to fit a role that society wants them to play. And so then they're not as easily diagnosed. And that really got me thinking, like it's been on my mind for a while. And we are, just to let you know, we're filling these cups up about 3/4 full. I'm gonna have to grab some more liners in a minute. Because apparently I'm either not putting enough in, and I also underjudged my amount of liners. But like just this whole idea of like women masking, right? Okay, and fitting into society, the expectations on women to have children and work a full-time job, and all of these heavy weights that are put on us. And just kind of really considering like, what are like, how do society's expectations of me affect me as who I am as a person? Like, how have I taken that and just thought that it was a part of who I was? And I'll tell you where this comes from. So, work bestie, if you're listening, I think this still will apply to you, because I know that the amount of responsibility that you carry within your family is big. So just hang tight and listen, okay? Pretty please. So it really got me thinking like about societal norms and expectations. And my husband was traveling a couple weeks ago. He was gone for a week. We were both only children. We didn't get married till like later in life when we were both 40. And I love being by myself. I always have. Even when I was single, I love being by myself. And so, I need more little cups. That moment where I thought I had more muffin cups but didn't. So I just sprayed the silicone liner with some olive oil cooking spray. Anyhow, my husband was gone for a week, and I had so many plans of things that I wanted to do on my own. Like even things like, we keep a pretty tidy house, and that's both of us. We just don't like a lot of clutter. But I had all these plans that I wanted to do, like all these writing things that I wanted to take care of and stuff like that. And when it came down to it, there was no way humanly possible I could have gotten them all done. And not that I really put pressure on myself, but it really made me consider, like, you know, when my husband is home, and he's amazing, like we're both incredibly independent. But like, even if I'm sitting in the office writing and he says something, I immediately jump up and like want to respond. Like, what do you need? Like, blah, 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 blah. When he does not expect me to do that. And he's perfectly capable of doing it himself. And so I've slowly just been turning off that part of me to where, like, unless he says, Jamie, can you help me? Or he comes to me, I just try to tune it out. And I'm wondering, you know, for me, I think that that's a pressure that's placed on females in society. Actually, yeah, I did think it was just me, but I'm slowly learning that that's what it is. And I started talking to a couple of my girlfriends that were married, and one's been married for a long time. I'm looking at you, Marco Polo bestie. And she said the same thing. She's also an only child. I was dropping my husband off at the airport, and we went to REI, and there was a woman who was retired from her full-time career, and she was working the register. And I mentioned something. I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to drop him off at the airport. And she was like, she looked at me and she smiled. She was like, I used to love it when my husband traveled for work. And then I went to Trader Joe's after I dropped him off, and I went for a different trip. And there were two ladies. One was checking me out, one was bagging, one was younger, one was older. And I said, they asked, how's your day? And what are you up to today? I was like, well, I just dropped my husband off at the airport. And they both grinned like it was the secret language. And I think I'm amazed that it's this thing, and maybe women are talking about it. It's just me that started talking about it with my friends. But as much as like we all love our husbands, I find it fascinating that we need all this downtime. And I think it's because, you know, women are expected to be so many different things to so many different people. I'm not really sure where this is all gonna head, so we'll just kind of go with it. Right now, I'm gonna put a pause in that. I have more to say about it, but I'm gonna throw them in the oven, and then when they come out of the oven, we will finish the conversation. So that way you guys can go and do your thing. And I will see you in about 20 minutes. Okay, one last thing actually. Before these go into the oven, we need to top them with the last blueberries and then a little bit of the streusel topping. I'll give you guys a heads up. This recipe, the way it prints out, is a little bit monotonous, but because it prints out everything instead of just the step-by-step, like you can't do it without the pictures because it's all embedded. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take a few blueberries. And the recipe said that, so I'm using frozen blueberries, it's just what works best for me. That they should be room temperature and no longer frozen when you use them. And I'm guessing that is so it does not add any more moisture. I think you guys can see I'm just sprinkling these on top. Okay, and again, this was the last third of the blueberries. I did end up having, this is just a standard size silicone muffin tin. It says it's only supposed to make 12, but this recipe actually is one of the bigger ones. I think it makes about 15 for me. I still have some batter left in the pan. And then we actually, so the streusel topping will set up just a little bit. I think you can tell. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take a little bit and put it on top of each one of these. All right. Yeah, so kind of back to what I was saying about just, you know, my husband being gone and that kind of thing. I don't know if part of that just comes from women in general and societal expectations. I am an Enneagram 2, which means I'm a complete people pleaser, and I have been my entire life. I'm kind of recovering at this point, and kind of catch myself when I'm doing it, but that's still my knee jerk, is just to really help people and be there for people. And what I noticed too, and this is kind of gave me pause for other areas of my life, but I noticed that when I was on guard and not fully paying attention to like the task I had at hand for me, and I was listening for something else going on in the house, it also makes me resentful. Like resentful that I'm even listening for that and that kind of thing, which made me feel that, you know, I wasn't actually being true to myself in those moments, the moments where I find resentment for doing things. So yeah, I'm just curious how, like I said, I'm not really sure where this is going, but for me, I think I'm just really discovering this whole thing around societal expectations on women and that kind of thing. And, you know, there's, I mentioned the book Cassandra Speaks, where, you know, Eve was actually curious and not trying to be rebellious or anything like that. She just had a mad curiosity, and I always have. I mean, I'm like Alice down the rabbit hole. I get curious about so many things. But, you know, when I was talking to a neighbor of ours, here I say that I'm going to do this after I pull it out of the oven, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the oven, but I will finish this conversation. All right, that is all in the oven, and we are gonna do it, we're gonna start at 15 minutes. It says 10 to 15. But I was talking to a neighbor friend of ours, and we were just kind of talking about this whole thing. She also read that book, Cassandra Speaks, and she was like, well, you know, the reason that it's done has to do with like taking power away from women and all that thing. She was like, it has a darker meaning. And I don't think I'd really considered it. I mean, I know, but I hadn't really considered it to that extent. And I just kind of started thinking about what she said, and it really hit me. And then, you know, with the SAVE Act potentially making it harder for women and minorities to vote. But she had mentioned, you know, it was keeping women in their place, and that, you know, that I find a lot of comfort right now with women not being put in their place and not getting out of the way. And, you know, I don't know, for me, like, you know, going back to my husband being gone, I really started to think about when I was single, the kind of things that I like to do on my own and how I can bring those back. And it's silly things that, like, you know, I did writing or I did arts and crafts, and I'm just going to start doing those because I think that that'll make me feel like I'm honoring my own choice. I'm making self-honoring choices. So I'm wondering for you, what are the things you like to do when you're alone, and how do you find ways to do them? If you have a partner, if you're married, I'd love to know, because I am looking for tips as well. The other thing, and I'm not sure if it's the age or the era that I'm in, since the event that shall not be named in November, but I'm in what I like to call my IDGAF era, or I don't give a bleep. It's just been happening since November, but I'll be 49 this year, and I feel like I'm in an age where I am drawing boundaries. Things have pushed me to limits where there's things I just will no longer put up with, and I'm not gonna be quiet about it. You know, and I'll give you an example of, I can remember, like, if you're walking on a sidewalk and you know, a sidewalk is not made for 4 people to walk across, or sometimes even 2, but if you have a man and a woman, the woman usually like kind of gets out of the way a little bit. I've stopped getting out of the way. If the man wants to run into me, that's on him, but I'm not getting out of his way. And I'm not saying that we're on a path to collision, but I think that, like, if we're both being humans, that naturally wouldn't happen. I shouldn't have to do all the stepping out of the way, but there's ways that you can move around people and be okay. So I'm not sure if all of these things about my thoughts and things around societal expectations, if they are coming as a result from that, or from age, or just the experience that I'm living in and the things that I'm going through. So again, I would love to hear from you guys. Again, the two things are, who am I without societal expectations? And then number two, what are the things that you like to do when you're alone, and how do you, and then the part B, how do you find ways to do them if you are in a relationship or married, to kind of keep yourself back to yourself. All right, I'm gonna pause it right here. I'll see you back in about 10 to 15 minutes and we will check out these muffins, okay? So this recipe in this oven took actually about 25 minutes. The recipe calls for, I think, 10 to 15. And I know my oven, I don't know if it runs like a little bit cold or not as hot or something like that, but I just wanted to, so you'll see the muffins on top, they have a nice little streusel top, and then on the inside, they are nice and fluffy. I honestly can't wait to smear that with butter and eat it and see what it tastes like. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know if you have any questions, and also I'd love to hear your feedback about those 2 questions I asked during the video down below. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye.